What is a moment in time you will never forget from your education? Welcome to episode 5 of this mini-series to help educators engage to educate. Right now we're going to unpack how to keep the attention of students. So if you've got it, if you've done an unofficial start, you've got a context hook to bring them in, maybe you started off with some connection before content to get them engaged. How do you keep their attention when it comes time for content? Right? You've got a ton of stuff to share, you've got a ton of stuff to download into their brain. What is the most impactful, effective way to get it there? That is what we're going to unpack. My name's Chad Littlefield. Let's get into it. This is the question that I asked 90 plus faculty at a university in the very beginning of our 5th workshop together. This workshop in particular was designed to help them transform their content or design their content for contribution, not consumption. Because as I mentioned in episode 1, when we design learning for consumption, we are competing with Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, YouTube, etc. And believe me, that's not a super good idea. It's really hard to be more interesting as an educator than a 6-minute video that had 40 hours of professional editors making it really, really engaging. Or maybe even worse, try to compete with the TikTok feed in a 60-minute class. It's just not happening, right? It's just, there is no hope of competing with consumption. A little bit of anecdotal data about this. I was actually looking at my YouTube analytics, and we'll flash up on the screen the demographic data. So the average watch time of my video tutorials based on age demographic. And at 65 plus, we're at about 5.5 minutes or so, and most of my tutorials fall somewhere in the 10-minute-ish range, right? Deep enough to really get a concept, but not so long that we've lost interest. So 65 plus, about 5 minutes or so, and then you can see it just goes way down, lower and lower and lower as you get younger and younger and younger. When the current generation is 65 plus, will their watch time be higher? Maybe, I don't know. It could just be an age thing, not necessarily a generational thing, but I suspect that because of the way that we're so addicted to constant stimulation, that things, movies, even though they change scenes every 3 seconds, are now too slow for us. People will be watching a movie on Netflix and they'll pull out their phone and start scrolling through a feed. There's so much screen multitasking that's happening. And so, man, hold up a lecture to a social media feed or a series on Netflix. You have to be a really good lecturer to get there. And so what I'll share with you here will help sharpen your saw as an educator to design content that's really, really sticky. There was a design thinking instructor at Stanford who met up with a group of faculty, chemistry faculty, and is looking at their syllabus for the chemistry program, and he noticed that what it looked like was what most syllabi look like, which is you open up a textbook, you take 1/15 of that textbook, you got 15 weeks in a semester, and there's your syllabus. Here's the thing though, really good design thinking does not start out with the solution, being the textbook in this case, right? It doesn't start out with the solution. It starts out with, what are you actually trying to achieve? What's the intention? What's the purpose? What's the problem? And so he asked faculty, when students are done with your class, what do you really want them to remember? What do you really want them to take away? And most of their answers were, I want people to love chemistry. I want people to get excited about the miracle that is chemistry. He said, okay, cool, love that. Look through your syllabus. Highlight every single thing in your syllabus that you feel like accomplishes that. There was not a lot of highlights, chapters 1 through 15, because he had designed content based around a textbook, not around how to actually engage a human brain live in the moment in education. And so what he had people do, and what I've kind of reinterpreted this idea, and invite people to create a syllabus headline. If you were to make the second page of your syllabus, so maybe the first page looks official, and this, you have to adapt this if you're not making syllabuses, if you're not in higher ed contexts, right? Think about the agenda, the training worksheet, the overview of the semester, whatever it is that you're giving to students to say, here's where we're going, here's our roadmap this year. Make the first page whatever official stuff you need to be there, and the second page, make it a completely blank page, go into a word processor, change your font to size 60, and write a giant headline for what you want people to take out of this course. Now this kind of goes back to episode 3 where we talked about context hooks. that headline should be a really good context hook. Now that you've hooked them though, you have to keep their attention, keep their engagement. And so what I did in this workshop with 90 faculty at WSU Tech was took a volunteer. So lovely human being named Pam offered up her syllabus and materials, course materials for algebra for review. She's in the Gen Ed department. And what I did was pick a slide at random, or pick a couple slides at random, and live in the workshop, I said, okay, I'm gonna present this exact same content in 3 different ways. At the end of this, I'm gonna ask you which of the 3 were most engaging or you're most likely to remember. What I chose was kind of the foundations of course culture. And so they were meeting in a hybrid environment, sometimes on Zoom, sometimes in person. And so talking about Zoom being on mute and some of the etiquette stuff like that. And so the first way I presented, I just kind of read the content. Here's the list of things you need to do, blah, 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 all words. Second round, I actually stopped screen sharing. I didn't show the PowerPoint and I experientially led the group through everything. And so I said, okay, so there's this, when we're on Zoom, there's this mute on and off dynamic. Can everybody just come off mute and say, hi, nice to meet you? So I did that and it broke this vacuum of silence, but it also created this culture where it was okay to come off mute and participate. Everybody's voice was out there in a really psychologically safe way. But you see how I demonstrated that. So the idea here is don't design for consumption, design for contribution. So take content, which otherwise would have been a bulleted list of things that we need to do, and change it into an experience. In this video, I'm gonna give you a framework to actually take any piece of content and transform it into an experience. Part of what I love most about my job working with some of the top leaders and educators on the planet is taking their content, plugging it into this side of my brain and popping it out the other side as an experience. The framework's designed to help keep you out of the fog. And even though I'm not a huge fan of acronyms, it does create an acronym, FOGS. And so F is framing. It's where you're actually framing a context for like, what are we about to do? What's the place that we're going into? So that oftentimes a story is a really good way to share framing, or a metaphor, or some little anecdote vignette, something to frame people's context, get them looped in. If you want to turn content into an experience, you have to give people an objective, right? If you actually look up like the definition of a game, or like what makes a game, it literally is there's an aim and rules. There's like some purpose, some objective, and then there's rules and guidelines. So when I presented this material in 3 different ways, I gave the group an objective. I said, I'm gonna present this material in 3 different ways. Your job is at the end to type in the chat which one was most engaging, 1, 2, or 3. So your guidelines might be a time limit, it might be the amount of people it can have, it might be some limiting factors of you can't use Google, or you can only use Google, or you can't talk. So whatever parameters you put on people, as soon as you add guidelines to it, it becomes a game, it becomes an experience, or gamified anyway. It becomes an experience as opposed to just an assignment. Something you have to do because I said so. And then last, the S stands for safety. And this is relates to, depending on what you're teaching, it relates to physical safety, but also emotional and psychological safety. That's probably the more common category of safety, is when you're teaching content, inviting people to contribute, the psychological risk goes up. When you're asking people to share their opinions, they're learning things, right? So they're not masters, they're not experts. So when you ask people to share out loud in front of a class, they're talking about stuff that they don't necessarily know really deeply. They're actually working through it. They're thinking through it. And so you want to make it as safe as possible. And sometimes that means literally just stating, it's totally okay if what you say is wrong and incorrect. In fact, my hope is that by the end of this semester, you flop or fail or get something wrong at least 5 times, because mistakes are the portals to discovery. So you're like, you see how saying all that would really build the ethos that it's okay to screw up. You don't need to be perfect in this class. As I'm giving you my workshop outline here, I'm kind of skipping around, skipping some pieces, because obviously the live workshop was quite experiential. It wasn't me talking to a video camera, it was us actually doing things. And so there was the voice of faculty, there was all this other additional spontaneous content that makes a session really come alive. So one specific way that I made a piece of content come alive, another faculty member shared their syllabus for a CNA class, a certified nursing assistant. So they're going through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid, as it related to their job as a certified nurse assistant. So in her PowerPoint deck, there were 5 or 6 slides unpacking each level of the pyramid. And so you could, as an instructor, lecture through that, right? You could just talk through all 6 of those levels. What I had the group do was draw a triangle, divide it into layers, right? So draw Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then I screen shared the PowerPoints and I simply said, you've got your pyramid. I'm gonna show you the content that's on the slides, but you are all very brilliant people. So I'm not gonna read it to you. I'm not gonna present it to you. I'm actually just gonna hold up the slide and let you read it. And I want you to choose your one main takeaway that you would love to remember when you're actually in a room with a patient. What is the one takeaway from the slide that you do not want to forget, and write it at that level of the pyramid? And we went through every slide and did that, and they chose what they were going to take away. Then, as an instructor, you might go back and present on that, but you've accessed their prior knowledge when you have them write out their reactions to content before you speak to it. Whereas if you just start out speaking to content, you're gonna lose some people because it might not relate, they might not actually connect or attach to that material, and so it's gonna be forgotten. Like, think of how much content educators on the planet have presented only to completely leave a student's brain. And ideally, we wanna minimize that. Pause. Little commercial break here. If you've been following along each episode, in episode 3, focused on context hooks, I told you half of a story about Frank in Sequoia National Park. And I told you in episode 5 I would share Frank's $1 million lesson. And so this is in Frank's handwriting, the 4 steps to being a really phenomenal listener. So feel free to pause it. I'm not going to unpack it deeply, but his thought was, if you practice those 4 things, mastering the art of listening in those 4 components will earn you more than $1 million. It's like a commercial break that gave you money instead of trying to take it from you. Not bad. Skipping to the close of this live workshop, I held up a very big question. What is one thing life is teaching you right now? This is one of the most useful questions to have in your back pocket as an educator, because it turns any experience into a teachable moment, into a learning moment. And so really, if you break down the experiential learning cycle, you can simplify it into these questions. What, got, so what, and now what? So you have an experience. What happened? You actually reflect on what happened. Gut, how did it make you feel? So what? Why does it actually matter? So you can reflect on that level. And then now what? What do we actually do with this content? What is life teaching you right now is a really great reflection question to start off that experiential learning cycle, particularly in the so what phase. So what did we actually learn from this element? So the way that I actually wrapped up the workshop with the group is by asking them, so what is life teaching you right now? We just went through all this experience. I presented your content in a variety of ways. What is life teaching you right now? And I asked them to write down some notes on that as if they were going to actually teach it back to the group. And then I invited everybody to jump into speaker view so that when somebody spoke, they became magnified on the screen, kind of created this intimacy, this human slideshow. And then I invited 5 or 6 people to teach their takeaway to the rest of the group. And what naturally ended up happening is that they ended up reviewing the content from the entire 90-minute workshop and reflecting it back out to the group, so I didn't have to. So 5 people taught their takeaway to the rest of the group, and very naturally, it actually served as a review of our entire session. So when you ask people to figure out their answer to this question, or any of the what, got, so what, now what questions, and teach it back to a group, you're not only reinforcing that learning for them, but you're also reviewing your content for everybody else, making it much more likely that it will stick. Last really magical tip to design your content for contribution: if you've got slides or any sort of information you're presenting, create a blank slide or spot every 7 slides or so, or every handful of minutes, and just do something to invite contribution. Whether it's a thermometer on a scale of I'm really getting this to I have no idea what we're talking about, or a Likert scale, or a stand up if you think you really got this and you could teach it to another group, right? Some way to involve some participation, some engagement. Because what that does is reset people's attention, makes them more likely to stay present for the piece of content that's coming next. In other words, break your lectures, break them up. Thanks for joining me for episode 5 of Engage to Educate. Episode 6, our final episode, will unpack some really concrete closing exercises that you can do to end your classes on a huge high. I'm Chad Littlefield. Have an awesome day.